Welcome, everyone, to Stepping Into Your Leadership. I'm your host, Christine Courtney. Our goal here is to give you some actionable takeaways that will help you lead your teams. Thanks for joining us on this leadership journey. Let's get started. Welcome, everybody. Happy New Year. In this New Year's episode of Stepping Into Your Leadership, I'm so excited to be in the studio today with Erika Bayh back here. Hello, Erika.
Hi, Christine. I'm so excited to be here.
Erika is a great leader, speaker, mentor, facilitator, author. So we welcome her to help us with this New Year's celebration. I know it's a little past New Year's for everybody, but I like to continue New Year's for a long time because I'm one of those people that has to kind of mull on my New Year's resolutions so I can be sure it's what I want to focus on this year. So we're going to talk about today the word of the year. And I don't know if you remember, but I had Erika and Blanca in last year. We were talking about last year's word of the year that we focused on, which was, do you remember, Erika?
Authentic.
Authentic. This year's word of the year that we're focusing on. Now, I know y'all out there are going to say, I know the word of the year is this or this or this. We chose the one that we like the best. Every dictionary puts out their word of the year, and I swear it's the only time the dictionary is famous again. But Cambridge's dictionary put out one word of the year this year, and we're going to focus on that one, and that is manifest. So I thought that was appropriate for goal setting, appropriate for the new year. The reason that they choose it, just so you know, is because of the amount of people looking up that word, the amount of web searches and so forth with that word in it. That's why they choose it. Other dictionaries choose other words, but this is the one we're going to focus on. So manifest. Manifest meaning, according to Cambridge Dictionary, either to show something clearly through signs or actions, or to imagine something into reality. Okay. Erika, I know you were excited about this. So talk to us about what manifest means to you and why it's important for everybody out there, even very serious business people and the few, maybe two engineers that listen to this podcast.
Well, first of all, to go back to how you started, loving to expand the new year past the one day or two that most of us are talking or thinking about resolutions. There's statistics that talk about like 30% or more of us fall off of our resolutions by the second week of January. So this idea of it shouldn't be something that we feel pressured to declare on a singular day, like New Year's Eve or day, because we usually don't then give it proper thought or actually think about what actually do we want for the year ahead. So to continue the conversation throughout January is actually a really beneficial practice, I think. And the word being manifest makes total sense to me. And particularly for the skeptical business person that might be listening, because manifesting can get a bad rap or can be dismissed as something woo-woo, right? I need a deck of tarot cards and a candle. And if I'm not that kind of person, then manifesting isn't for me. When in fact, manifesting or the practice of manifesting shows up in so many different spaces and places, from the most heavy-hitting leadership book to the tarot card reading, candle lighting practitioner, because this idea of believing into seeing is really the heart of what it is, which is simply about intention. And that's why it is a beautiful thing to talk about as we're early in the year, because the idea here is manifesting in this way means, how do I imagine 2025 can be for me? What does it look like? What does it feel like? Who am I with? What are the benchmarks that I would feel so proud to have achieved if I'm looking back in December of 2025? And the art and practice of manifesting is to start to act as if those things are true, to act as if that my current reality matches this future vision. And then we act our way into an actual reality where we're putting ourselves in places where the circumstances start to work in our favor. So it's actually a great practice that really is just a different way of thinking about goal setting.
Yeah. I love it. And if you think about it, really athletes use this all the time. They may not use this word. It may be visualization or, to visualize your future, to imagine it. But people have been doing this forever. It's just that this word manifest has just become such a popular expression.
It has. It's true that when you think about athletes, I was thinking about, there's so many images of athletes, you'll see them sitting off on the sidelines, either on the bench or on the floor with their eyes closed with headphones on. And later, if people ask them, what are you doing in that time? That is exactly what they're doing. They're imagining a successful outcome to the game or a successful outcome to the match. They're visualizing success for what they're about to walk into. And 100% of the time, they talk about how it puts them in a better actual place to show up for the game, the match, the moment. 100% of the time, it doesn't go the way they visualize it, but 100% of the time, it puts them in a better mental space to physically show up in a different way. So it is such a, and yes, if manifestation is a word that makes people go, ugh, no, thank you, then insert visualization or insert goal setting. Find the word that allows you to open your mind to this idea of when you believe it and when you visualize it in your mind's eye, then you start to, what you look for, you find in life. So if you're looking for these things that you're visualizing, you will start to find them in your day-to-day life as well.
And I love this idea that the brain is Teflon for positive thoughts and Velcro for negative thoughts, because I think what happens so often in that manifestation stage or that visualization stage, even with athletes, let's say, or you're imagining something good can happen. I got this, imagining what it's going to be like. There are often times when it doesn't happen because the brain is so powerful, is that something comes in, that niggling negative voice that goes, you can't do this. You're not going to make this. They're going to be better than you, whatever it is that comes in. And then you're like, oh, manifesting doesn't work. Well, also because somewhere along the way, you had those negative thoughts somewhat invaded that positive. And not to say that you don't have to work hard at things, but the brain is more powerful than we can even imagine at this point, right?
Yeah, it's true. It's that confirmation bias, I think, is that idea of like, I am going to find what I believe. And so if I've chosen to allow those negative thoughts to stick, I'm going to find plenty of evidence for those negative thoughts. See, that didn't work out. I didn't get that. I didn't win. That didn't go my way. I can collect evidence all I want. It's all the more reason to really give serious thought to the practice of manifestation, because it's a sort of a tool to combat when those negative thoughts inevitably do arise. Is that if you have put in intentional practice and take seriously the power of manifestation, you have a tool and a resource for when those negative thoughts show up to combat them with the positive ones, to reframe your thinking, to sort of refocus your lens and move past that into, well, now let me reframe the way I'm looking at this. So it actually can be a resource when you get stuck in the negative loop.
I recently did the Tony Robbins, 4 days of, I forgot the name of it just now, but what's amazing is on that first night, right after you've been there all day long and all night, they tell you you're going to walk on fire, like you're going to walk on hot coals, and you're like, no way. Like in my head, I'm like, yeah, I'm not sure that I'm doing that, right? Like, I'll take the rest of it, but not sure. And when I had signed up for it, I was in a really bad place in my life. I had just, I had torn my knee, my meniscus. I was walking with a cane. I was just not feeling like myself at all. And you know how sometimes something like that happens and then everything else in your life starts to go a little bit negative? That's what was happening to me. It was just felt like, what's happening? I need some sort of shift here. And so I signed up for this. I thought, well, I've never done this in my life. I've heard that Tony Robbins is like a pretty powerful speaker. I want to see who that is, anyway. So I signed up for it. Mind you, when I was still, like, I was going through airports to go to speaking things in a wheelchair. Like I had people, I couldn't even get through an airport right at this point. And so I was imagining myself at this Tony Robbins thing, sitting, I was kind of like in my imagination of it. I was by myself in the chair, like in the handicap section. I was just imagining like, okay, but I'm going to do this whole thing in my head and I'm going to get, some very quiet realizations that will help me, and then I'm there the first day. And of course it's anything but that. First of all, my leg is doing much better. I had been in PT. And so I was walking, but I wasn't 100% confident. But then throughout the day, you're like there and you're with everybody. They have you doing much like, the work that we do. You have a lot of exercises with folks. So all of a sudden strangers become friends and in some ways even closer in a weird way, because you're telling them things that you probably wouldn't tell your friends because you'll never see these people again. Right. So anyway, you're sitting there and then they're telling you you're going to walk on fire. And the whole time in my head, I'm like, I'm not doing this. Like it's already late. It's midnight. We haven't walked on fire yet. I need to drive back to New York. I don't know about this. So then the woman next to me who I'd been talking to all day says, she was from Louisiana. I said, are you going to do this? And she goes, oh yeah, I'm definitely walking on that fire. And I said, you are? And she said, oh yeah. She goes, you know why? Because I did this 4 years ago and I didn't do it. And all I've been thinking about every day since is that I have regret that I didn't do it. So I came back here paying all of that money to do it again. And I'm too cheap, Erika. So I was like, oh, dang, I don't want to have to do this again.
I'm doing it now.
I'm doing it now because I can't afford to do this again. So I was like, I said, really? And she said, oh, yeah, I'm doing it. And I said, okay. All right, girl, if you're doing it, then I'll do it with you. And she's like, all right, we're in it together. And then I thought, because I had this buddy, I was like, we're going to do this, right? So that was one thing that was helping this new manifestation start to change in my head was a buddy, right? Which is what they say for all good goals, because it's much harder to back out on a buddy once you've said that, right? Next thing, still Tony Robbins is prepping us for this. And it's just remarkable how he does it, but he's prepping us for it. We practice it in the stadium, in the arena. We're practicing it, all of us together. You do all these things to kind of get yourself hyped. And in the moment, you get your body going, you get the heat going, and you start thinking of something that's strength, right? That's going to get you through it, and breath and all this stuff that gets you in that positive mindset. And he works with athletes all over the place because you kind of have to trick your brain out of thinking too much, right? Because if you think about it, you're like, why am I going to walk on hot, burning red coals? Like that doesn't make any sense. My
feet,
right? So, and I was still going, I don't know. There has to be a trick to this. I bet it's not really hot. I bet it's, So anyway, they go through this whole thing. And by the time you're like hyped up, you're like, okay. So then you have to take your shoes off while you're still in the arena. Now, I don't like to be barefoot on a beach. So now I'm barefoot in a stadium in Newark, and I'm then have to walk through the parking lot in Newark and down the streets of Newark. Okay. So I'm like, just at this point, burn my feet off. I'm like, what?
Right.
So I'm like walking and I'm like, oh, I'm going to get plantar fasciitis, like everything. And I was worried about walking because I still wasn't walking perfectly because of my knee. And he was saying, you have to walk. You can't walk fast because you'll trip. And that's the biggest danger. So you have to walk assured and confident and like a stride, a strong stride. And so I was like, okay, oh God. And then we get to the place. And then what happens when you have this vision and I have my buddy and I know that I can do this. Like I got this. I'm prepared. All the things for a goal. Then you're in line to walk on this fire thing. And I'm like, okay, looking at it, watching other people, because that's what you also do, right? When you want to achieve a goal, you watch other people and see how they're doing it. So I'm like, okay, if that guy could do it, I could probably do this. It's now like 1:30 in the morning, right? In the streets of Newark on this thing. You're freezing. It's November also, you're freezing. So then you're like, okay, I'm going to do this. And they give you mantras, they give you things to say, do. But what's fascinating is right before I was supposed to go, I had the smell starts to come over me because it's burning stuff. And Erika knows this, but many of you don't. When I was young, when I was in 9th grade, I burned my house down. Well, what comes back to me is that smell. And smells are so powerful. And that's a horrible memory. So now I'm like engulfed with this thing and I'm like, oh my God, I'm like stuck. I'm like, I can't do it. And then I turn to my buddy and I say, I haven't told you this before, but I burned my house down and that's exactly what it smells like. And she goes, oh no, don't worry. This is different. You got this. And I was like, okay, thank you, buddy. All right, we're doing this, right? She's like, we're doing this. And I'm like, okay. So then we go and I said, it looks pretty good. Like the coals are kind of blackish, little red bits here or there. I thought, okay, that doesn't look too bad. Then all of a sudden a wheelbarrow comes over full of red hot, burning, fiery coals. And I'm like, oh my God. And they pour that down and they're like, okay, your turn. I'm like, no way. So then I look at the big guy. There's this big guy next to me who was behind me and I pull him and I'm like, you go next. And I put him in front and he goes, really? I'm like, you got this. You got this. And then he goes, I said, I need a moment to see that this is like truly physically possible, right? But what's fascinating is that they have a person, Tony Robbins people have a person standing right there that looks at you as you do your like breath work and everything that's going to get you, your visualization to get you through this. And they have a moment and he sets you up for this. If they you have to look them in the eye right before you go. And if they see a flicker of doubt or a flicker of negative thought come into your head, like I can't do this or I'm worried, they pull you out of line. Which I saw somebody do, and they sent you back, more like 5 people in so that you can get yourself in the right headspace because those are the people that burn themselves. Fascinating. So then I was like, okay, I can't be that. I have to succeed. So I go look her in the eye. She's like, you're ready, go. And then I'm like, you go and it's over in no time, and then you get to celebrate and, wipe your feet on the grass and, be happy that you're through it. And then you're like, what the heck did I just do? And then you look through the process. And then I watch my friend and I celebrate for her. Right. And then we're thrilled. And then we walk back with our warm feet now through Newark back to the thing. But it was absolutely fascinating because I said, here I am just a couple of months later thinking I wouldn't even be able to walk, that I'd be in sad little
Yeah.
wheelchair during it. And here I was like, wow, I just walked through fire. But the process was not just like you think about this and that's a manifest. Like the process was so complex. You have a friend, you work all day getting ready for it. You imagine it. If the negative thoughts come in, you know how to physically get those out of you. You have a check to make sure. And I thought if we did this for all of our goals, we could do
Yeah.
anything. And by the way, you don't get your feet burnt, which is just remarkable. That's how powerful that brain is. I know it's a long story, Erika, but it's
a great story. Well, as you were talking, there's so many things in that story, right? Because it is that sort of action meets the visualization, which is so important that you mentioned, that resilience and not giving up, and the power of regret, talking about your friend. There's so much in that. As you were talking and telling your story, I was thinking of a video I had seen on social media recently of a young boy in a karate, like a martial arts class. And, if you've ever been in with your own child or seen online, a common sort of early practice is learning how to kick or chop with your hand a board, right? So in this case, the boy was trying to learn how to kick the board in half and he was struggling. And so the instructor was on the ground with the board and the boy kept trying to kick and miss and kick and miss. And he was crying and crying and crying. And the instructor, you couldn't hear what he was saying, but you could hear that he was telling this child, don't give up and you got this. And then what started to happen is all of the fellow students in that dojo were shouting words of encouragement. The boy is sobbing. And he kept kicking and he kept missing and he kept kicking. And then came the moment where he hit correctly and split that board in half. And immediately the entire group of students swept up into him, picked him up. It was one of those moments that brings tears to your eyes watching because you know how that moment will stick with that boy for the rest of his life, in that I didn't give up, versus if he would have, or if the instructor would have let him off the hook, that would have been in the back of his mind of maybe if I just tried again, I could have. So the power of the support system. So in your case, your accountability buddy, or the coach, the Tony Robbins coach, or the other people who had already walked through fire, like the power of community is so important in this, that we can't sit in our houses alone and say, gee, I wish this thing would happen. And I'm just going to sit here alone and wish it would happen. That is not at all what any of this is about. The visualization is the starting line, but then you need to activate your own daily actions and steps that you take, and you need to activate community of support, whatever that looks like.
I love that, yeah.
Whether it's an accountability partner, whether it's somebody that will cheer you on when you're on the other side, because those are the wins that remind you you can keep doing it. You can keep going.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because you're stepping into their experience and celebrating them, but you're also celebrating yourself at the same time. Because you're right, that was part of it. Once we get on the other side, you're supposed to turn around and cheer the other folks on, So that's true. That's very powerful. In terms of you thinking about goals, like for the new year, because you said that, I love that it's okay to be late on your New Year's resolution, but also this idea of goals, right? Because January tends to be when we start looking at goals again, or what we want to achieve. What are some things that are some best practices for people out there that want to do something, or maybe want to manifest something and want it to happen, whether they use that word or not? What are some best practices that you found with folks? Because I know you work with a lot of people on this.
Well, in my experience and in my observation, a best practice for sure is not to make sweeping declarative statements about how you will transform it into an entirely different person.
It sounds like me.
Such a common
It sounds
mistake,
like me
right?
every year.
We all do it, right? We'll make a resolution or a goal that is so far off of our current reality in our, I'm going to go to the gym
every day,
7 days a week for 2 hours. And you're a person who has gone to the gym once in the last 10 years. We make such declarative, I'm just going to be this whole new thing. And it's so unrealistic that we are doomed to fail. And then we start to have those negative loops. Ooh, they kick in strong. See, you never succeed. You're clearly a failure in every way. So a best practice is the more incremental, small changes, small daily habits. It's sort of, I like to think of it as what's an enhanced version of me. Not, I'm going to change into a whole new person. What is a more expanded version of the me that I really feel proud of? What's an expanded version of the me that feels most content? How can I amplify the places in my life where I feel really good? Whether it's I feel I'm contributing, whether I feel happy in this situation or this relationship. So it's like amplifying and expanding what already feels right for me.
I love that.
We also pick from a list that's, it's like the common list. It's like somebody sometime somewhere said, here's your January list. It has to do with debt or weight or relationships or diet or blah, blah, blah. Every single person has a different, unique experience. And so what is the best version of me, and how can I start to tweak and really lean into that best version of me?
Well, and science backs that up. I mean, what you're saying is so true. You made me think about this, but really it's about playing on your strengths. And what they're showing is that you have more chance of sticking with it if you're doing something you like. And we tend to like things that we're already somewhat good at. So if you can really lean into those things and amplify those, I love that.
Yes.
A good reason why those tend to work. And you tend to be excited about them, not like, oh, I have to go to the gym or whatever,
Exactly. How often do our resolutions list look like a punishment list? I'm just stating all the things that are clearly wrong with me, and I'm setting a goal to punish myself to success. And then we're shocked that we fall off before January is even over, as opposed to leaning into the parts that are good, because it is, we're meant to enjoy our lives, and we're meant to have a good experience. We're not meant to continuously berate or punish ourselves. And so I feel like that's a way that we can, if we reframe the way we think about our resolutions, our manifesting, our goals in January, it's really that idea of what's the best version of me in this year.
Yeah. And if we have a lot of folks out there that listen to us that run teams at work. Okay. So this is also important to think about when you're setting goals for your team, right? Not always the things that your team isn't doing well or that you're not hitting, but also what are the areas that your team does really well? And how can you set some of your team goals to be around those things so that they can be excited about being the best at this? Or if they're great at sales, how can we really increase that sales number? If they're not good at sales, maybe they're good at something else in what they do, creating new ideas or how can we double down on some of that? It doesn't mean that we don't have to shore up those other things, but in terms of like motivating or inspiring people and their brains to work, that would be a good approach, not just with ourselves, but with our teams as well.
Absolutely. Well, and I talk about, it's a practice that I don't even know who to attribute it to, but I talk about it a lot because it's a great practice, which is for yourself, the idea of imagining yourself in this case, in December of 2025, and writing a letter to yourself to celebrate the year that you've just had, right? So you'd be like, hey, dear Christine, what a year I've had. This happened and that happened and this and that and the other, because that gives you clues to what are the things now in January you want to start to do to then be able to say those things in December. Because sometimes we don't even know. But if we start to think about a year that would have been the best possible year, we may surprise ourselves at what shows up. So the same exercise is great for teams too. So if you're a team that's doing a strategic planning session now, if we sit down at the end of Q4 and say, this has been the best year yet, why? What happened? What new clients did we get? What new systems did we implement? What new products did we innovate? Whatever it is, what made this the best year yet if we're sitting in Q4? And now here in January, what are the things that we can do today to start to put energy into that space? And if you approach it from that way, then I think you are more inclined to then say, oh, Christine, you're really great at Yadaba. Oh, so-and-so, you're great at this. So I think it already puts you in that mindset of, well, if this is the vision we have, this is how we want the year to go. Let's rally the team that we have in the spaces that they're going to thrive.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a best practice in terms of managing anyway, because Marcus Buckingham, who I love, he's a researcher, right? Who wrote 9 Lives About Work, and he worked on Strengths Finders and so forth. And a lot of his research, and Ashley Goodall, both of them together, both of their research was about really how focusing on strengths makes such a big difference in the outputs. And one of the numbers that I use all the time, and maybe it can relate to this as well, in terms of goal setting, is that it is 40 times more powerful to give people negative feedback. And remember, we call it constructive criticism or, tough love, whatever, but they hear it as negative. Okay. No matter what. So let's just call it what people take it as. It is 40 times more powerful to give people negative feedback than it is to ignore them. Okay. Now, so I say to people, if you're don't ignore them, at least give them tough love, at least give them criticism, at least give them some attention, right? However, it's 30 times more powerful to give them positive attention and positive feedback than it is to give the negative. So that's 1,200 times more effective to give positive feedback than ignoring. But most people, so we ignore sometimes. We tend to give the negative because we're afraid, or we go, oh, these are our numbers. We got to get better at this, guys. We're not good at this. Let's set goals. Let's look at what we didn't achieve this year. How are we going to achieve it this year? Right. And what I love about what you're saying is like, instead of that, like, let's look at what did we do well? I love that letter, best year yet. I'm going to try it this year. I'm going to do it with myself, and I'm going to do it with my team too, because that's such a great idea. Because then you're building on strengths.
And you're building on, and this is the power, to take us back to the beginning, this is the power of manifestation, because you've created a picture and now you know what color to pick up. Now you know what to draw with your paintbrush because you've created the picture. And that's the power. And that's why, whether you call it visualization, however you want to practice it, there's no space where it doesn't belong, because it has power in any space. And because you allow yourself the ability to really see into the future, the reality that would be most impactful, meaningful, fulfilling, whatever it is for you, you create that reality in your mind's eye. And then you understand that's where I'm headed. So what do I need to do today?
Yeah.
What do I need to do in April? What kind of spot check should we do in July to make sure that we're on course? It really gives you a map.
It gives you a map.
That's much more powerful.
It gives you a community, like you said, because you're working on it together. But it means, and I know there's some, I hesitate to say guys, but I know exactly who they are that are out there, hopefully listening, that will say, well, we need to focus on these things that we need to get better at. Yes, we do. However, where you start can be really powerful to get the emotion and the power behind focusing on the difficult stuff. Start with something that you're going to have a win and get that energy to help propel you through the tough stuff.
Well, exactly, because nobody wants, well, not nobody, but it's rare to find a person that wants to be failing, right, or wants to be falling behind or meeting below expectations. You're going to be hard pressed to find a person that's choosing to not succeed. And so we're never saying don't dismiss the parts where you need to shore up. But to your point, we're saying if collectively you've created a picture and a vision of where you're headed, then people might better understand, oh, I need to tighten this up for myself so I can contribute to that picture that we're all striving to achieve together. So you're creating a positive structure within which you can then say, hey, we need to make sure that we're doing this with a little bit more urgency. We need to make sure we're doing this with a little more precision. Whatever the quote unquote deficits are, if it's in service to, if we can fix those deficits, we're moving towards that beautiful reality we all want. It hits different.
Okay, so this is what we're going to do. She gave us a great tip, you guys, about writing a letter to yourself or to your team of best year yet. I love that. Starting with something positive, another way to go. Like instead of starting with things that, are your deficits, starting with something that's your strength and leaning into that. Erika, I'm going to have you back next week because we're going to talk about just tips. It's going to be 10 minutes, you guys. It's going to be short and fast and like just a bunch of tips for how to set some resolutions and how to set some goals and so forth for next year that might be more exciting as you manifest who you want to be and what you want to do for this year. So Erika, thank you. And hopefully you'll come back next week so we can tackle that. Okay.
I can't wait.
Okay, bye. Thanks everybody for listening. I'd like to give a special shout out to our podcast producer, Richard Francisco. Check out our notes for any details. And if you get anything out of this, please follow us. And if you enjoy it, please take a moment to rate us or write a comment. It will mean the world to us. We'd love to hear from you. And if you just can't get enough, follow me on TikTok and check out tlpnyc.com/podcast for more information.